Hello, everyone. I am Rita Houston, and welcome to this live. This live that I decided to call "Wow, we never thought about it that way." And I'm joining you from Norway. I'm in Stavanger. Tatiana, where are you right now?
I'm just outside London in a place called
Mm.
Beaconsfield.
Where was it again?
It's called Beaconsfield, so it's just outside London. So it's basically very, very close to London. Yes.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. So, we'd love for any of those of you who are connecting with us live to let us know where you're listening in from. It's nice to have your names pop on. It's nice to see where in the world you are listening into. So, please go ahead and do that. Engage with us in the chat, ask questions, and we will do our very best to answer you. Now, I want to just keep you informed that there is a delay on LinkedIn. So you might write something in the chat and we don't see it. And I've even got LinkedIn running here on my phone in case something should pop up and I don't see it. So, oh, I do already see it. Hi, Eva Kanik Peterson. Peterson. She lives in Stavanger and she's actually a very good friend of mine. I still haven't learned how to pronounce the surname. Welcome to the chat. And also, I would like for anyone who's just listening into the recording, engage with us. I mean, Tatiana can be connected with through direct on LinkedIn. You have all the details there, the same with me. So please, even though there is a delay there or you're watching the recording, we are here to be in communication with you. Now, today we're going to talk about intensity, and I'm sure that you might have a lot of questions around that. On the event itself, wow, we never thought about it that way. Now, this is a monthly live, and it isn't about providing you with more information. Absolutely not. There is already so much information out there. This is about insights. You having those aha moments or those subtle shifts in your energy as you hear something that creates a change in how you see or experience something. So listen to something where it's like, wow, I didn't think about it that way. It's a new way of looking at the challenges and questions we all face as human beings. It's really to turn things in to we get to do things instead of we have to do things. It's really a shift in that language. And today I am super excited because we've got Tatiana Poliakova with us. I am very, very excited. So she's not just any other guest, she's a very good friend and a fellow colleague of mine in the Mastermind 4PC. She is the Chief Expression Officer at Adapta. Gotta love that, right? Chief Expression Officer. Currently writing a book on intensity. And she has been transforming leaders and teams for over 28 years. And Tatiana, you have seen it all. You've seen it from the high stakes world of international investment banking, where you managed billions of dollars, or maybe it was pounds. I don't know. It's a lot for me to take in. And you went from that to coaching top executives and entrepreneurs in that world. And today you're here to talk about intensity, both toxic intensity and healthy intensity. And what I say is like, it's basically turning intense energy into incredible results. So welcome, Tatiana.
Wow, Rita, what an introduction. Thank you so much. And I love being here with you. And what a great way to introducing of, wow, I haven't thought about that way. And as you said, it's not about additional information, it's about that insight.
Yeah.
And what really resonated when you said we get to do things, and I would say, and some of us get to be intense. And
I know we do.
right, because you see, I was called intense my whole life, and it wasn't always meant in a positive way, right? So it's
Mm,
sometimes um, women in business, in finance, senior leaders, I put this label on. When we speak up, when we
mm,
express ourselves, when oh yeah, she is aggressive, she is too intense. And there was a period of time, when I thought, oh my gosh, how even am I going to be a coach when supposedly I was known as one of the most intense people in the London fixed income market, right? I was like, how does it reconcile? And then I reflected and also observed it in my clients, because as an intense person, I attract intense people. And I observed that
mm,
intensity by itself is not good or bad, that
mm.
it's a presence of certain energy. You see, the intense leaders, they are noticed. Um, and that carries a certain responsibility,
Yeah.
because if we carry that level of energy that is so noticeable and impactful, then where am I putting that energy? Is it put towards a positive impact in the world? Is it directed with purpose and intention? Or does it come kind of from the place of fear? Because I
Mm,
I know in myself, and I see it in some of the leaders, when we are in fear and even unconsciously, and it's so easy to go into defense or attack when, say, somebody disagreeing with us, right?
yeah.
And that can lead to big explosions, because particularly if it is intense leader, it can actually lead to conflicts and wars, because defense is actually act of war. So for me, it is about how to channel that
Mm,
energy with awareness towards purpose, towards positive impact, and be aware of whether it comes from the place of belief and trust in self and trusting in others, and then it's demonstrated with self-control, or where it's actually there is this underlying old, might be some childhood even fear that drives a particular behavior,
yeah.
and as a result it leads to distraction or sometimes burnout inside.
Mm,
So
mm,
that's kind of my in short summary what differentiates um, toxic intensity and healthy intensity.
mm.
And it's not one or another. It's about being aware in what moment does it switch, how does it show up.
Yeah.
And it might be in
Yeah.
some situation
Mm,
still this toxic intensity comes up, right? But
mm.
if I notice it early on, then I'm a choice.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that, and it's so interesting as you talking. There are kind of a couple of stories that pops up in my own head, and I think, okay, I can be a. I'm known actually to be a pretty intense person myself as well, and I think for those who have been exposed to my intensity will have whatever experience of that, and if I'm thinking about when I was really fighting for my son's life, when everything is a must, it's like it doesn't matter. It is a must, and I'm going to stand up and I can do exactly what I need to do, whether they agree with me or if they disagree with me. And I can share with you, when you literally have 98 of the medical industry literally against you because they believe that they sit with the truth that there are no solution, there are no medicine. And I'm coming from a very different perspective that it doesn't matter what is now, it is about what can happen in the future. And the future can be much, much closer to you than you think. And I had to choose to go in there being very direct. In one way, I was experienced maybe forceful, in particular with some doctors. And I remember I was called the tigress. So nothing mama
Mm.
bear. It's not like, oh, here we have the mama bear coming in and she can lift cars. No, no. There was no mama in my reputation. It was the tigress. She comes in, she wow, and then they do something. And so for some doctors and specialists that I spoke to after we did discover medicine was that they were taken by uh, they experienced fear themselves because they didn't have answers. And therefore, they criticized me because I saw the world from a different perspective. So it's very easy in that respect to call a person intense with a negative tonation, whether I would say, absolutely no, that intensity is needed in order to find solutions to some of the, again, I work with the greatest challenges in this world. I mean, I don't know. What do you think, Tatiana, when I'm just
Oh
sharing
my
that?
gosh, it's such a great example because
Mhm.
basically you were driven by a clear purpose, and there cannot be a bigger purpose for a mother than the life of her child. And then you were going for the possibility and for the opportunities and creating the future, and it's amazing. This is exactly, for me, that's a demonstration of healthy intensity. And yet, of course, what also you touch on, that some people might be upset about that,
Mm,
and that's what it is. Also, the perception of other people might be different, and that
mm,
says a lot also about what is going on for them. It's not good or bad. You said that in this situation the doctors were feeling that, oh, we don't have a solution, and that's, I can straight away feel underneath the fear, what are they going to think of us, what how am I going to come across, and like I need to justify myself, right? So, and that's fear. You were like, okay, fine, it's what is right now, but what is possible, you see? So
yeah.
and it is a perception, but you actually, through that, you also have been an amazing driver of change. And that's what happens when intense leaders are really on purpose.
Mm,
They become a real drivers of change.
mm, mm,
And of course, it might trigger people around. And I'm sure you were going into those conversations not not blaming or shouting. You were speaking the truth, and what
mm,
needed to be done for uh, for the health of your son. And actually, in that,
mm,
you drove the development of important medicine, who
mm,
really saved lives for
mm,
many people around the world. And this is what's so
mm,
powerful. That's what a healthy
mm.
version of intensity can do.
I love that. Thank you so much for giving that back to me because it's like I've never been in a conversation where we're really talking about the word intensity, being intense. And one way it feels that it's almost closely linked to intentional, like that you can come from that intentional perspective, and that can also be coming from a purpose-driven intention or something else. But be intensive is is driven by energy, and I think the difference I've noticed in myself is when I'm its own purpose, I speak very clearly. If it's from a perspective of fear, I become very different in the way I speak. And I did experience that in particular as a leader, where I could be very intense. And when I'm thinking about it now, when I was very intense in certain meeting and people were like, oh, whoa, taking a step back, I felt the problems around me like overwhelming. And I was fearing for my reputation. I was fearing about what is next. And the only way I felt I could hold my power was through that. Or it could also be, I believe that my way was the highway. This is how we're going to do it. And I was very successful doing that. But Oh, and often is always pretty intense. So where do you? I mean, I'm thinking about yourself and the people like client you're working with. Where do you see that level of intensity show up? That
Yeah,
on the opposite side.
it's a very good way of looking at that. It's basically recognizing then when certain level of fear is driving the behavior, right? And
Mhm,
it can be, and I can think of the situations in meetings, when actually there is this underlying fear, oh, I need to prove myself. And for
mhm,
me, the default, like kind of this default mechanism is going into fight, right? So that's why it's so important to be aware of that, and that can get one into this tunnel vision. So what
mhm,
and even like staying on the subject of children, I know that, for example, one of the saboteurs I have been working with throughout my life is hypervigilant, right? And that's also related to health. So and when this intensity goes into toxic version, I could become like, oh, have you made you made sure that you're taking vitamins? Why you're not wearing this? Or make sure, and I would repeat it 5, 6, 7 times. And in the same way, actually, the same thing can be shown also in the work environment. Are you sure you have done this presentation? Let me double check your slides. Speaking to somebody in an in a team, right? Uh,
mhm.
Double checking everything and triple checking rather than letting go sometimes and empowering. So trying to
Yeah,
stay in minute control of the situation, right? Rather than, okay, the most important thing is to define mission, to check that we are in agreement with the team, that we're on the same page in terms of what direction we are going,
mhm,
and showing the trust, right?
mm,
And when those agreements are broken, think, okay, how can we recalibrate? Where is it coming from? What has been missing? Staying
yeah,
in this more open curiosity and being okay with people sometimes making their own choices. Like I'm just thinking like hypervigilance, which for me sometimes shows up about what vitamins my daughters have taken, or when they have a cold, and they still like continue exercising, so it's kind of not life threatening, but trusting self and trusting the child, and in the same way trusting your team member. So
yeah,
it is
mm,
it is ability what gets us into tunnel vision, and
mm,
sometimes the tunnel vision is required, by the way, because when we are going through some fast execution, we need to focus on on the task at hand, right?
yeah,
And it's when it's done with awareness and with
yeah,
clear communication as well.
yeah. Um, so if you think about it, I'm just bringing in the listeners here as well. In your experience, Tatiana, what are things one might be called when you are intense? Maybe you don't know you're intense. Maybe you don't know in that whatever version it is, healthy or toxic, whatever. Because sometimes you can come from a good place, like what I was, a purpose driven, going to the doctors, and still they would talk to me as something that, oh, they were pushing me aside because I was too much, right? But I was still doing the right thing for the circumstances and actually for the world and for my son. What are people being called operating from this intense level?
Yeah, and you see that's a very interesting that's a great question, and I can
Mm,
tell you I was called, for example, in my early career in banking, I found out I was called the bulldozer. And interesting, of course,
mm,
it's upset me. And you know what? It's about the expectations and also about the own perception, right? So I just was coaching a senior woman leader, and as we were having the session, she we were speaking, okay, what would your manager say about you when you are not in the room? And she literally reached out to her manager, and her manager tells her he would call me a bulldozer. And I thought she would be upset, but no, she wasn't. She was like, yes, I am a bulldozer. If there is something needed to be done, I will go into this mama bear energy, and I'm okay with that. So you see, it's like it's also being okay with those types of definitions. And of course, another subject is a range of acceptable behavior. And what happens is that for women, unfortunately, they're still based on many millions of years of our tribal history, right? The range of acceptable behavior for women is much more narrow because for we go back thousands of years, women were valued for being a carers, and that's what society kind of recognizes it. So what it means is, that's why there is this famous case of when the same CV was sent, with one for men and another one for women. Say one CV is called Nick and another one Liz.
Yes.
If we go back 40 years ago, then believe it or not, same CV, and Liz was considered less competent, like ridiculous. Like now we go 20 years ago, the same CV sent, and Liz is now as competent as Nick. However, Liz is less liked, right? So what does it tell us? It tells us that when Liz is speaking up in a meeting in an assertive way, she might be labeled bulldozer, intense, aggressive. When Nick speaks up, or he's passionate. And that's, and sometimes it's like, there are different types of men as well. That could happen, to a man as well. And for me, it's about removing this label. Well, first of all, intense, it doesn't mean it's bad. It's like, it's a big force. And secondly, being aware of this behavior range and how it could come across. And thinking, how can I expand that behavior range, because it's also possible.
Yeah, and it's interesting as you're here. I'm just seeing what is being put in the comments. So Eva, she's using a Norwegian term "flinkpike," which is like good girl, the good girl syndrome. We are afraid to be looked at as too much if we speak up, and then when we do speak up, then and we are intense, where we are passionate, then we might be like, oh, you're a bit too much, or like, oh, that's very intense, that's very direct, that's very, like, it's interesting to see what we can be called. And then it's difficult because when we have our entire life been behaving and tiptoeing around, and suddenly we step into something that we're very passionate about, the minute we are being called things by women and men. This is not about women, no, men calling us something. It's also about women. They can also call us the same thing. I'm curious about, have you experienced working with your clients also? The question I'm asking is also referring to yourself, because you have experienced intensity and being called a bulldozer, and there's a reason, as coaches we often say we coach or teach what we most need to hear ourselves. So there's a reason why you decide to write an entire book on the topic of intensity. I mean, it's like, whoa, a book on the intensity. Have you experienced where as a leader or a leader, where intensity of the toxic and the healthy version can live a harmonious life? Have you experienced anything like that?
Yes, of course. It's because actually there are always shadow sides and light sides to us, and it's not one or. And when we notice when this energy goes from the place of fear, it's also realizing that it's a superpower when awareness is applied to it. And it's also the way then to turn it to the superpower is first of all with compassion to oneself. Because what happens is, when some leaders show up with toxic intensity, they're often judged. Oh, this person is like that. And I'm just, my thoughts go back to the trading floor when a trader is being particularly aggressive or like, shouts. And I would be also like, I was in sales, and if the trader is like losing money or he's afraid about his or her position, and they become very intense with you, right? It's not pleasant, and it's easy to go into judgment. But actually, in that situation, what those leaders need the most is actually compassion, because however tough, however harsh an intense leader comes on the outside, trust it, they're probably much harder on themselves.
Yeah.
So and also what happens is, and I remember from the trading floor how me being intense and thinking about one particular intense trader, right? He becomes very shouty and undermining. And when I'm in a toxic intense stage, I would match his toxic intensity. So then it becomes not a pleasant situation between us. And then of course, that affects the environment around, even if we go to the room to have this highly intense conversation. And I can tell you there were many, like some of them, right?
Yeah.
And looking back, how to handle it by not engaging into those fear contagion, because that's what actually happening. And for me, sometimes the example of the leader who is able to handle such situation was actually Angela Merkel, because there was like those famous,
Yeah.
she used a lot of like this Aikido, like type of methods in her negotiations. So when there is some person who tries to demonstrate their strength and their power in a more toxic way,
Yeah.
actually, if you focus on calming yourself down and not engage, then that strength can bring them down.
It's interesting because I heard you talked about how to be in the meeting when two intense people are meeting, or basically you use the question how to do something, and my love for twisting that question around.
Oh yeah.
I always say there is no what if we are moving the W from the how to the front so we get who. And I just want to kind of test the version with you as well. And if you're thinking about, okay, how do I approach the meeting? What if we turned it into who would you be as a person entering the meeting when you wanted to be calm and collected and you're still passionate? Who would you be? If you think about yourself and you face this situation, who were you when you dealt with it in a beautiful way versus when it felt too toxic?
Yeah. And I think when I dealt with it in a beautiful way, the first thing was compassion to self and compassionate to others as well, and compassionate to our human experience. I remember actually an example. There was this hedge fund guy on the other end of the phone who was quite dismissive, aggressive, hang up the phone on my junior, right? And on that day, I was able to stay calm and managed to have a conversation with that individual. And then later on, I found out that his child was just diagnosed with cancer, right? So we don't know which battles people are fighting, what is going on in their life. And so often this behavior also doesn't even come from that moment right now. It comes from a little child being up themselves, like, the little boy or little girl being excluded, being upset, right? And then
Mm,
energetically, it feels like similar situation, and people go into explosion. So having this compassion, and it doesn't mean justifying bad behavior.
mm,
It means not staying in inner peace despite that bad behavior. And actually, what happens is,
mm,
if
mm,
somebody is like clearly under effect of fear or anger, if we, in that moment, if we focus on our own breath, it's amazing to observe how another person starts coming down.
You're
Not
giving
at
some
that.
amazing advices here. Like, as you say, talk about like breath. You take a deep breath in, and people are starting to follow your breathing. I'm curious. I see that there are some comments here. Oh, hey, Camilla, you are in the house. She's from Copenhagen. Kuljit, hey, Kuljit, I met you with Rich Living Intensive in Santa Fe last week. Amazing. Yes, you're in Birmingham. And yes, Eva, you're talking about how true it is, what is being shared here. I also would love to hear from those of you listening in. Um, Either what questions do you have around intensity? Um, I know some of you have experience in the hiring process of people in HR where you might experience somebody being called intense, or maybe they have been hired and they're coming back to HR and saying, "Oh, this wasn't what we thought. We hired this too intense," or maybe the word is too passionate. I always say, when people are being too pushy, I say, "Okay, what if we turned it into too passionate? How does it land?" Very
Mm.
differently. So I would love to hear from anyone who listening in here, also watching the recording, what shows up for you when we delving into intensity and how it shows up. And Tatiana, when you were talking about how your client, I think it was a client of yours who was aggressive or hang up on you and all these things, and then you learn that he had a son who was just diagnosed with cancer. Um, what I heard you share before you passed that information on was that you showed up being compassionate. You showed up being calm. And this is where I hear we're turning the how into who. Who are you being? I'm being compassionate. I'm being calm. Uh, I am breathing, right? I'm breathing. I'm following my breath. Um, what other things would you invite people who know they are intense? Like, I know when I'm intense. I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm in the general intensity category, but I definitely can go there. Uh, what else would you recommend for a person who is a leader and know they're intense because they are passionate, but as you say, there's a dark side of your genius, and the dark side of the genius can be that you can also use it when you're feeling overwhelmed or fear or something like that. Like, what is your recommendation or advices that you would give to your clients who come to you and say, "Oh, I'm struggling with being too intense"?
So a great question, and it is becoming really curious about oneself. It's about what happens to one's energy when one is in healthy version of intensity. When you were going and advocating for your son and for all those other patients, like that energy, I'm sure, felt quite expansive.
Very.
Right. So exactly, and noticing when the energy within ourselves feels expansive, leading to creation, that you're like growing, and when this energy feels like contraction, because that's when
Mm,
because when it might be that you go and advocate for your son and there are people outside who are upset, but you still feel in this expansive energy, you still feel in connection, right? That's for you, it is a healthy version. On the other hand, sometimes if when I'm stuck in a meeting and I'm get drawn into the toxicity of the situation, it feels also like a contraction. It feels like pushing through. It feels like, something is off. And so getting to know one's energy, what are the signs, like almost like in a car, what are your indicators that the fuel is running out? Or that you might put a wrong fuel in your car, that there is actually something what is needed right now is a bit more of love to self and love to others. And instead, this thread is being fueled in.
Yeah.
So that's an important part of, and also understanding what actually drains your energy and what gives you energy. That's all part of that. That's all part of getting to know different sides of own intensity. And truly believing that that's actually this intense energy is superpower, and forgiving self, because what happens is then like, oh my gosh, one can start beating oneself up, right? So because even the curiosity I'm speaking about myself, for intense leader can go into intrusive questions, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, it's observing, when does it, what am I noticing around me?
Yeah. Yeah. I really love that, and I think this is, we are both people that talk about reminding people of how powerful they are. And personally, I do not use the word empower in my practice. And the reason why I don't use the word empower is that for me, it is a word that indicate I am above somebody else and I am therefore empowering you. So what I'm doing is to constantly see, where can we peel this onion, so you're starting to see how powerful you are. You're born powerful. And sometimes we are so disconnected to our energy, we're so disconnected to who we truly are, that we don't even pay attention to the contraction in the body. We don't even pay attention to the fact that we feel like, wow, I'm so expansive. I feel so amazing. And it's interesting because in the end, the work, no matter where we're coming from, is really to master yourself, like master your self-awareness, get to know yourself. And what I'm hearing is, when you are working with your clients and you're helping them through that, it's like, I don't hear you give them the recommendation of, and this is how you communicate with XYZ. What I'm hearing is that get to know yourself so you know where your energy is coming from. And obviously, Tatiana, obviously, when we are leaning into the flow of energy, the words that comes out through our mouth is different. And at least
Yeah.
the energy behind the words are very, very different, right?
Yes, because first of all, we also manage them to connect with what we truly want, because then it becomes not about right or wrong. We're coming back to what is actually my intention, what is the purpose here, right? What would make me feel vibrantly alive,
Yeah, yeah.
and what if I'm able to communicate that in my conversation. And actually, do you know what, when we come from that place and also put another person in a position that they can be our hero, like,
Mm,
like
mm,
I'm thinking back to even this aggressive trader, how would
mm.
I speak to him if I believed that he actually is a great human being who is having a bad day?
Yeah.
Right? So
Of
because we
yeah.
assign those labels, And when we
Absolutely.
assign those labels and we communicate to this other person from that position,
Mm.
and of course, it just the conflict just becomes bigger and bigger and becomes interpersonal love rather than something which is opportunity for new beginning. And that's of course it's every situation, every conversation, but in the first place is to start with oneself, to get to know oneself, to get to know one's energy, to get to know one's desires.
Mm. I think it's just so beautiful how no matter what we're working on, we always return to the basic principle, and that is really get to know yourself. I'm just reading a Kuljit comment here. Pain creates intensity. Your response to it can come across as negative or positive. When I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I was bombarded with people telling me about what I should or shouldn't do. It was so intense and too much for me. It was only when I had a conversation with my own cancer that I was able to filter out people's good intention for my well being. Cancer and I became friends, and I was able to be calm and accept their well intentions and intensity by saying what they wanted to say. I needed to make friends with it now and forever so that I could breathe again. Wow, that is so powerful. Thank you so much, Kojit, for sharing that.
Wow.
And yeah, and we
Mhm.
do, and therefore, when we are going back to what you said as well, Tatiana, is like if you are always thinking about people with compassion and care, and you slow things down, you might pick up certain things with the other person that other people's don't. Like there are something they're not telling the world because they want to keep it for themselves, and therefore all our gazillion advices is kept aside because we are
Mhm.
curious about the other person and asking the other person questions instead of just throwing over. So,
Yeah. And actually,
mm,
I want to add that it's such a powerful share
yeah,
that you just
so
read
powerful.
because it's
Mm,
becoming friends with something that people might consider dark side, but
yeah,
actually by showing compassion to it, and that leads to that unity rather than being in reaction to some like other people
mm,
comments, because by becoming friends with even cancer, it allows the healing.
yeah,
It moves from separation to integration rather than, oh, I'm in reaction to that person who says that. And that
exactly.
allows one to connect to one's
Mm,
truth
yeah, yeah,
and separate what advice is resonating with that truth
yeah,
and what not.
yeah.
Really
So
powerful.
true. Yeah, yeah, thank you. And this is the power of engagement from all of you listening in here. And again, if you're listening to this as a recording, please engage because it's a conversation. It's a bit difficult as we can't really see. We can only write or see the writing. Uh, Lastly, before we close here, I love this conversation. What is it that you're up to? So who is usually coming to you and what are you offering to
Mm.
them?
So people who come to me are normally leaders who are passionate, who are driven by
Mm,
purpose. They are intense, and they want, they have this desire within them that they want to put the energy towards something good. So, and people work with me either one to one, or there are group programs as well, because of course there is all this like interaction between different leaders in intense environment and different intense leaders. And it's also about diversity, but so often intense leaders are actually neurodiverse. So how
mm,
to create the environment in a team that allows to apply the energy in the most effective way and
yeah,
benefit from this diversity that is present. So yes,
yeah,
people can find me on LinkedIn, both under my profile or under Adaptive profile. So yes,
yeah.
and with Adaptive we run various leadership programs. And next week I'm going on the retreat to Transylvania
Ooh, that is so amazing. Pennsylvania. I know we're going to be there 2025, I think
Yes,
26.
exactly. What we see right now, it's our audacious leaders. So, which is a really transformational retreat.
Yeah. Are there any availability still on that
Well, there
retreat,
should be as
or is it
well.
full?
Well, we're flying on Thursday, but there is one last minute cancellation, but so if but it's
Okay.
very short notice, but might be
Of
next
course,
year.
you never know.
But who
Maybe
knows?
somebody's listening in from the area.
Exactly. Somebody might be listening and saying, that's exactly what I need.
Yeah, yeah. Beautiful. I love it so much. And again, what I want to share with everyone listening in as well is that the conversation that I am having here is because of my own mission. I work with people, prominently women, but I also work with men, but who are on the mission to solve some of the greatest problems we have in this world. And I'm actually next time going to talk to Tim Wotton, who has gone through medically a lot of challenges, and I can relate very much to his journey in the same way as I've done with my son Benjamin. And what I would love for you in general, who's listening in, to put in the chat is, what is it that is, wow, I didn't think about it that way after this conversation with Tatiana on intensity? What is something that you just didn't think? Like for me, it's about when you're talking about, um, I think you didn't say pushy to passionate, but it's the same feeling as like you can be perceived as pushy, but the fact is you're actually very passionate. And that can be seen as very intense, right? I was perceived pushy, tigress for my son, but I was passionate to save his life. I was passionate to create a happy life for him. And I was misunderstood. I didn't give up. I didn't give up. So thank you so much, Tatiana.
And
And
thank
for
you.
everyone else, beautiful. Join us in a month's time. And again, put any comments in the chat and we will get back to you and read them, both Tatiana and myself. Okay? Bye for now. Thank you,
Bye bye.
Tatiana.
Thank you, Rita, and thank you to our listeners.